Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast, where you demystify the creative process and exchange ideas with career-minded artists. We are your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We're two emerging artists sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our journey. So if you are not already, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday.
So on today's episode, we are really excited to welcome a special guest, Carly Jones. Hi, Carly.
Hello.
A quick background about Carly, if you guys haven't met her. So Carly is an arts nonprofit leader, theater artist, singer, arts advocate, and cultural activist who seeks to elevate social consciousness through the arts. She's a proud Raleigh native and performs on stages throughout the region. She is a versatile artist performing in opera, music theater, as well as classic and contemporary theater. When Carly is not on stage, she works in arts administration with organizations throughout North Carolina. Recently, she became the president and CEO of Artspace, which is where Jackie and I are based out of, which is a nonprofit visual arts center located in the heart of downtown Raleigh. Artspace is a space for creativity, arts education, social practice composed with 25 artist studios, artist residencies and exhibitions, art educations for all ages, abilities, and community outreach. So that is a lot. Is there anything else you would add to that, Carly?
No, you pretty much summed it up. I do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and as Adriana said, Artspace is where both of us have art studios, which we talk about so much on the podcast, just the amazing atmosphere. And so we've loved having you as our CEO, which is the first time I met you. I definitely heard of your music prior. And so it's been so cool getting to know you as the CEO, but also just a fellow artist throughout Artspace. And I was curious, I would love to hear more about your background and if you've always known that you wanted to get involved in the arts, obviously as an artist yourself, but also an arts administrative side of things. Balancing the two, I'm sure, is very challenging in those dual roles.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the podcast. I hear you all recording in the building sometimes. So it's I'm very honored to be a guest this time. So but yes, my background is varied. I think anyone who has a career in arts administration has a different journey. There is no blueprint for a career in arts administration, really. And so as you've heard, I'm a performing artist, not a visual artist. But I still have that shared experience of, figuring out how to do your taxes at the end of the year, putting together many different gigs, many different contracts, juggling, working, and also being a performing artist. More so when I was younger, when I first got out of college, I was performing constantly. Now I, get maybe like a couple shows in a year, with my arts administration career really kind of taking off. And so to answer your question, yes, I've always wanted to work in the arts. At first, when I was younger, I just wanted to perform all the time, and that's it.
Yeah.
As we all figure out as we get older, especially in this country, it is a bit difficult sometimes to solely live off of your art. And so when I was in college, I actually went to school on an opera scholarship. And my dad was very concerned about me graduating with a degree in opera and nothing else. And so I ended up getting more education up there and another degree in music history, Black music history, and then also in arts administration. So it's kind of like learning the business of what you love. And I really enjoyed it. I started working at small nonprofits, actually when I had a vocal injury and I could not perform for about a year. So I used that part of my education in arts administration with grant writing and helping small arts nonprofits, and then found out, hey, I'm kind of good at this. So,
Yeah.
so then I
Backup
started
plan.
working at different organizations, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. And I think it's so cool. Like, even just hearing that, I feel like there's so many parallels with my history is very similar. Like, went to undergrad for studio art, focus in painting, and I got my master's in exhibition design and material culture, of learning like the behind the scenes. How do you put an exhibition together? What spreadsheets and documents do you need? So it really is like learning the business behind the art that you love. And like, how does this
Yeah.
role in the spoke of the wheel work, and what do all these other spokes do, which is so cool.
Mhm.
Now I'm sure it's probably kind of like a full circle moment leading a nonprofit's art organization, and you've been involved in so many since then, since graduating and now,
Yeah.
because you are from Raleigh originally, correct?
Yeah, born and raised. There's not many of us left
Yeah.
because so many people are moving here, which is awesome. But yeah, I was born and raised in Raleigh, went through the public school system here, and I I actually went to camp at Artspace when I was a little
Nice.
kid. So talk about full circle moment there.
Yes.
And yeah, I performed on stages throughout the region, and did all sorts of artistic, explored different artistic expressions. So yeah, born and raised in Raleigh. I've seen it grow. I've seen it change. And I'll be honest, when I first got out of school, I was like, okay, I'm not going back to Raleigh. Because,
Yeah.
it was definitely much smaller when I left for college. I went to school to Miami, University of Ohio. So I went out of state. And
It's pretty far up.
it is, yeah, it is far. And then when I got back, I was like, oh, it's actually fun here. There are things to do. And I was performing constantly. So yeah, I've really been able to create a beautiful life for myself here at home. And I like being close to my family. It's kind of cool watching your hometown grow so exponentially. And to be a part of the fabric of
And
that,
it's the art
is
community.
really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, before becoming a president and CEO of Artspace, what would you say was your relationship with Artspace outside of saying going to arts camp when you were a kid?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a very unique relationship with Artspace. I worked at the North Carolina Arts Council, which is the arts council that is at the helm, at the state level, within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So I worked for the government, state government, as the senior program director for artists and organizations. So I was there for almost 4 years, and that's kind of the other side of arts administration, where you're reading grants and reviewing organizations. And Artspace was actually one of the organizations that I worked with on an arts administration level. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's
That's
kind
awesome.
of a change of hats, right? So definitely I knew Artspace from an arts administration standpoint, as well as all sorts of different visual arts organizations across the state. I got to travel to different cities and towns and go to exhibition openings and chat with leaders about how they're involved with the communities surrounding them. And so I knew Artspace from that level. I also, of course, love First Fridays.
Yes.
That was my jam. So, yeah. And then when I was growing up, Artspace was also kind of one of the anchors in downtown Raleigh, where folks had events and community programming. And so I'm very familiar with Artspace, and really it seems a bit surreal that I'm now at the helm of it, to be very honest.
Yeah, and I'm sure that like experience seeing the arts of North Carolina in a more almost like the upper level, knowing all these different organizations, these organizations throughout Raleigh, and understanding how they all work together and kind of the role they play in our community probably is super helpful now as the head of one of them. Because I'm sure from a networking standpoint, growing up here, using those relationships. So I'd be curious how like networking and relationship building with other organizations, how you see that as a role of leveraging and building up other communities in Raleigh, but also the arts communities as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think partnership is key in creating a thriving, healthy, and growing arts infrastructure. We're all, nonprofits, trying new things. And I did a lot of work when I was at the North Carolina Arts Council with arts equity work. So making sure that our grants and systems are really broken down for folks, no matter what background they come from, so that people can have access, artists and organizations, to fellowships and grants and understanding the process. And so I really learned a lot about community building and partnership through that work, and true authentic community engagement really requires time in relationship building, and it requires trust building, to be quite frank. And in order to do that, partnership is a key aspect of that. And so I really value the perspective that I come with from traveling across the state and working with museums and galleries and theater companies and dance companies and symphonies and you name it, music festivals of all different sizes with all different size budgets. And the state of North Carolina is also just an incredibly culturally rich state. Like, when you think about the mountains to the sea, it's so different. Like, communities and people are so different, and they work in different ways, and they try different things. And so, partnering with folks is really important for us to be able to grow. I think Raleigh definitely is large enough, and it's growing, for all arts nonprofits to be able to kind of do their thing and be bold and partner and support one another, and all of us simultaneously thrive. So I definitely believe in partnership.
Yeah, I'd be excited to see if at some point or another, maybe this exists already. So if it does, I apologize in advance. If there was a way to see in one room, one conference building, whatever you want to call it, what all these different art administrations are like, almost like think of one of those like what are they called? Like college job fairs, but make
Totally.
it like
Yeah.
artist nonprofits. That would be something that would be so exciting, because sometimes you're just searching and you don't know what they all are and what the different grant opportunities are and everything else. So I'm actually excited that a lot of what I've seen Artspace do is get some of that information out there, through the Artspace newsletter, and it has a lot of information of calls from Artspace and others. So I don't know. I'm really excited to see kind of how that evolves. And as you spoke about with your partnerships, kind of how all that will cement together, but one thing at a time, of course. You just got in the
Yes.
door not that long ago. You've already done a lot of different changes, which we're extremely excited about, and of course, cheering you on all the way. But with that being said, just overarching, not too terribly specific, because this would be like a I don't know, 48-hour conversation, but the synthesis of it, what would you say is your overarching vision for Artspace going forward?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So my vision for Artspace is for us to continue our work in um, creating positive community impact through art. That's our mission, which is a very, kind of a broad statement, but it does fit with everything that we're doing. I want us to continue to grow and as Raleigh grows. And I want us to be a thriving hub in the middle of the capital of our state and Raleigh, North Carolina. So a thriving hub of artists to be able to support one another, collaborate if they'd like to, network, and get all the resources that they need to be able to thrive in this area. I also want us to always be inclusive and accessible with our arts education programming, which we've done for almost 40 years, and continue to get outside of our building. Our building is amazing. We own our building. We will always be here. We're a permanent anchor in the middle of downtown Raleigh, which is awesome. But we also need to get outside of our building and into neighborhoods and communities with our arts education. And our new amazing team at Artspace, Danny Pena is the head of education here now, and David Moore, our new director of community engagement. They're working really hard on creating those partnerships to be able to get outside of our building so that then folks, more new faces will come into our building, right? And then, of course, continuing to offer residencies and exhibitions that are community engaging and also support the whole artist. And so that's kind of the three prongs there is, education that's accessible and inclusive, forward-thinking exhibitions and residency opportunities, and then overall becoming this thriving hub. We already have, one thing I didn't know before I took the helm is we are the largest community of visual artists under one roof in the entire state, and one of the largest in our region. So that's something that I hadn't heard before. And I think it's something, we're so unique, Artspace is such a unique place. And I think I've met lots of people who know Artspace for one thing, but they don't know us for everything we do. And so I want to tell that story, and I want us to continue to grow and to continue to just be a place that feels like ours. Artspace is our place, is the thing I keep saying, and that means artists, that means communities all over the region. We have such a mosaic of communities. And so making sure that everyone feels included, making sure everyone feels safe and supported and celebrated, quite frankly, in what their needs are and who they are is my vision for Artspace.
Yeah, and I love how inspiring it is. I know as part of the community outreach, there are tours of school kids that come through, and just seeing their eyes light up and being like, wait, I can be here when I grow up? Like, this is actually a career choice? Like, this place is so cool. And they come in, bright eyes and bushy tails, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
And just seeing how supportive it is, even for, the younger ones, all the way to every age, of course, and every background. This is the kind of place. So I spent many years in Charlotte after moving from Vermont. And I never found it that kind of a central hub. Yes, there's the artistic district, NODA, but it wasn't as centralized as Artspace kind of seems to be. It's literally like, yes, there are other studio spaces and there are some other studio type buildings in our triangle area, but Artspace, I don't know, it just seems to kind of like grow from the middle, and I don't know, it's amazing. I just wanted to say it's kind of inspiring and the kind of thing I wish I grew up knowing existed as an option, because I didn't grow up knowing I could be a professional artist with a public facing studio in a cool downtown. I didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah, exactly. At Artspace, the creative process is up close and personal. We want to get away from, I think sometimes the visual art world gets a bad rap for being, inaccessible or elitist or, exactly. Folks,
like behind closed doors, like, don't ask me questions. These are my secrets. Like, I was
Yeah,
like, you to see
exactly.
the finished product in the gallery. Please be in a ball gown. Thank you. And you're like,
Exactly. Or like walking into a gallery and it's so quiet. You're like, ooh, I don't know. Like, am I allowed to be in here? It's,
yeah,
we want to kind of break that wall. And yeah, like on First Fridays, I tell people, you can come on First Fridays, you can see the amazing exhibitions that we constantly have rotating, but also you can walk in all of these amazing studios and talk with artists about their creative process and chat about their work. And so I think that is something it's definitely not always accessible to people. And so being able to kind of break that down for folks and create that point of entry for people, I think is really unique and accessible. And I will say it's interesting. I've been talking with different artists. Artspace is not for everybody. Some artists are like,
yeah.
you know what, Carly, that is not my jam. I want to be in my studio. I want to be working. I don't want to be anyone to come see me. I don't want to, and I get that. I would like to say we are not open 24/7. We have open hours. So
Right.
if a person has a studio at Artspace, you still have time to have quiet time and you have access to the building 24 hours. But I get it. It's not for everyone. And then I have other artists that come to me and say, oh gosh, do you have any studio spaces open at Artspace? How many visitors do you get a day? Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
Yeah.
these are two very different artists with different needs, and there's a place for everybody. Right.
Yeah.
So it may not be at Artspace. It might be at Anchor Light up the street, that's not open to the public throughout the week. It has a very different environment where you can really focus and like have your space. And they do have open houses, a couple times a year, which is awesome, but very different and needed. We're both, studio environments that are needed in this growing city with so many artists,
Yeah.
so.
And that's definitely something we've talked about on past podcast episodes as well, is like, is a community facing studio correct for you? Which, because especially after like shifting from like a home studio to a public facing one, at first, like,
Right.
it is very exciting and like people are interested in your work, but there is a balance where like when you have to almost be like, okay, you're to an extent like a gallery owner by your own little gallery in your studio, or a shop owner. So you have to wear multiple hats as well as the artist. So understanding how do you divide your time between those two, managing
Yeah.
your own expectations, because some days it can feel like you're in a little fishbowl sometimes. Or my studio especially is actually right under Carly's office. So I'll see you guys walking and I'm like, hey. Or I'm doing
Yes.
computer work in my studio cubicle, as I call it, like behind a wall. And so it definitely does like shift your relationship with the creative process. But as
Yeah.
Adriana was saying, I think one of my favorite things, in addition to the, which this would probably just turn into like an Artspace fangirl episode,
That's
Adriana
fine.
and I are like talk about all day. Of like, in addition to even like kids coming to the to Artspace, which of course absolutely love, I think my favorite thing is getting that same reaction from adults. And like having adults come in and like they're bright eyed and they like are amazed by this space. Like, I've lived in this city for 5 years and I had no idea this building was here. And like I pass by it all the time, and like they finally come in and they're like, this is such a unique space. Understand, like, meeting all these different artists, and inevitably they talk about like the musical play they helped build sets for in 8th grade. Like, getting all of those stories of like even just inspiring people to maybe get back into some kind of creative practice, or oh, like I
Totally.
love taking photographs, and like pushing them a little bit to like explore that more. Like, what does that look like in adult life? Because I feel like that's
Yeah.
one thing that's like underplayed a lot, into like, oh, graduate college, get the 9 to 5, make money, and
Right.
like,
they're done that.
yeah, and it's like, okay, like all these things that you do have to face, but also like, what is your creative outlet? And understanding
Right.
that's a huge role too, that I feel like is almost awakened by adults when they come into art space, seeing other adults and artists going a million miles an hour with their craft, of like, well, what would that look like for me to like watercolor for an hour a week? Like,
Right.
Well, I think that's one of my favorite parts too, especially having other emerging artists as well. Adriana and I used to go and hound the artists every single first Friday. I'm sure we've told you that story, Carly. We used to like go be like talk to every single artist for like 20 minutes and be like, give us your secrets. We have questions. And like everyone's so welcoming and really now being artists there ourselves, like wanting to be that for other emerging artists and really
Yeah,
demystify the career path because it is so non-linear and being like,
exactly.
yeah, and giving other people advice, which is so fun.
Yeah, I think my favorite are some of the emerging artists that much like when we started, we were scouting out the place, so to speak, would be like, said, who do I have to talk to get in? Who do I show my portfolio to?
Yeah.
Can you actually make a living with this? And like helping to demystify some of that, which is long story short, part of why we even ended up, starting this podcast in the first place was to
Yeah.
share some of that same information. The classic, sometimes we'll have folks drop in with their artwork and be like, can I get in? Look at my art. And it's like, sorry, that's not us, but it's
Yeah. I think that's also something that I know you've been working on as well, is like within the past less than a year of really like demystifying that and getting the
Yeah.
marketing out in our community, like of the importance of Artspace as a role, as well as, okay, if you want to be an artist here, like this is exactly the process. This is the procedure.
Yeah.
And this is, if it might be a good fit for you, it might not. And being very transparent with that up front, which I think is super, super important, both for the artists themselves, but also like the community of artists at Artspace too.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not here to make a secret club, right? We're here to be a resource, right? And so, yeah, we put out our community guidelines earlier, shortly after I got here. And the first thing I did when I started the role as CEO is had one-on-ones with as many artists as I possibly could, to understand more about what we need to do to support artists, even more than we already were. And that was one of the main things that I kept hearing was, well, I didn't know how to get in, and I didn't know, like, I didn't like, well, and folks out in the community as well, were wondering. I was like, well, this should not be a secret. This is we should just be upfront and transparent about this. I think it is really important for us to distinguish, what Artspace's community is about. We're not a commercial gallery. While we support artists selling work, because you must sell your work, that's not something that's not what we're focused on. We're focused on creating a community and a space for artists to be able to work within, and then, set up a professional space to be able to run their business out of as well. And then the rest is up to them, right? And the more we talk about artists' creative process and the more we talk about artist stories, well, naturally people will say, ooh, I like that person's work. And they'll go to their website, and then the rest is up to them, right? So taking the middleman, like us, out of that equation is really important. We have not ever been a commercial gallery. So I think that, and there's a place for commercial galleries in our infrastructure as well. I'm not downing. I think that, like I said earlier, we all serve different purposes, all of our different organizations within the art world. And so, yeah, being transparent about our community guidelines, and the types of artists that we are looking for, artists. And it doesn't mean you have to be in your studio 24/7, but it does mean that we want you to engage with community in some capacity. So maybe that's you teaching a class with us. Maybe that's, or teaching a workshop in your studio. Maybe that's being here every single first Friday, and right, like you all. But yeah, it's just important for us, and sharing everything that we do at Artspace on your social media platforms. There are different ways to engage with community. So that's one of the main things that we look for in an artist, when they are looking at being a part of our community. We also, want to make sure that we have a variety of mediums in the building, a variety of artistic practices, people of different age ranges, people of different cultures, people at different levels in their careers, so because that's what makes a community of artists truly unique, and being able to have this really interesting fabric that's supporting one another. And so, it's not about, I learned when I've auditioned for a million different shows. And sometimes when I don't get the role, I had to learn, as I got older, I'm going to get more rejections than I get, um, the actual role. And it doesn't always mean that I wasn't fabulous and I didn't sing my face off in that audition. It just means that I'm not the person that they need at this time. Like another person is better for that role. And so I think that's important for artists to know, that when artists do apply for studios, which we are now putting out there every time a studio space is open, we put it out there so it's transparent, people can apply. And we set up a panel internally, and we review those. So it's looking at your work for sure, absolutely, but it's also keeping in mind who we already have in the building and the overall kind of how this artist would fit within the community at this time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting process that we've been evaluating.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my favorite things too, also about Artspace. Is like I always tell people, like before we were artists there, we used to come just as like Artspace fangirls, basically, which is still continued. It's just grown. But I would tell people like it was my favorite place to take friends and family, because there's so many great galleries or museums where you go to amazing exhibitions, but like there's different styles of art for everyone. And so if you take them to an exhibition that you love, that just might not be an art style that they connect to. But when you go to Artspace, you're about to love something. Where it's like one person loves an abstract oil painter and one person loves a jewelry maker or a sculptor. And they're like, oh, well, did you see this guy down the hall here? His work is awesome. And what about downstairs and over here? And so it's a great place, I think, to like take a group of people.
Totally.
Because everyone's going to have a different experience there, but they're going to have a positive experience. And then also seeing like room to room, like it can be like a drastic shift in styles, which I feel like makes it even more fun. You like are more intently looking at each style and how they compare to each other, which is super, super awesome.
Yeah, and another bonus I feel like is either as an artist or as an aspiring artist, for those folks that for the longest time I myself was one of those working in a corporate environment, didn't think of myself as an artist. It was just a pipe dream at the time. You also get to see how artists set up their spaces. And it gives you that little bit of a daydream of like, ooh, look at that table over there and that workbench and that easel. And like, look at the setup. Look how welcoming they are when I come in, and all the questions. Look at the books they have on their shelves. It's kind of like, it helps you kind of visualize, could that be me someday? Which I think is really, really important for those folks that are looking to eventually make that shift into art and have just shelved it for years, maybe haven't even drawn since they were a kid. So I'm like, that's another route. I keep bringing it up. We're definitely fangirls, but another how I think that Artspace is important in the community is to help kind of place make in a way in our brains, visualize, can this be for me? And the answer is like, there's some steps required, of course. It's not overnight, but it is possible. But with that, I do wanted to ask you, obviously we're talking about all kinds of different initiatives and things that have been put into place, which is really exciting. Obviously for those folks that are listening, hearing this episode, that haven't been to Artspace in a while, obviously we are welcoming you and prompting to you to come in and see what's new. A lot has changed for the better, of course. But I wanted to ask you, what is one upcoming project that you're just like bursting at the seams excited about, that you just want to tell the world about it?
Sure. Oh gosh, there's so many. Okay. I would say our upcoming fundraising exhibition, Fresh, is really exciting. And I hope that every single artist in North Carolina listening to this will submit their work. It's a really interesting fundraising exhibition. It kicks off in May, and then it goes into through June. So the first part of it, it's a non-juried exhibition. So anyone who submits their work that is a 18 and or older professional artist here in North Carolina, we will hang their work in our 30,000 square foot building. Okay.
That's amazing.
So North Carolina artists will like take over the building,
Yes.
which is really awesome. And then throughout that month, folks will be able to have an opportunity to come in and purchase the work. Now, this is a little bit different from an auction. A lot of folks do auctions, which is another way to raise funding or raise money for a nonprofit. Ours is not an auction, it's a fundraising exhibition. So artists will have the opportunity to set their own prices for their work. And then there's a split. So 60% goes to the artist and 40% goes towards our work of making sure that we have low subsidized studio spaces in the middle of downtown Raleigh. We offer our studio spaces at half the market rate, and we want to continue to do that for artists. It also goes to accessible arts education, as I said earlier, that we provide, and then all of our residency and exhibition programming that we provide in the middle of the city. So it goes to a good cause and supports this thriving hub that's in the middle of the city. And so then we hope to sell as much work as possible. And then in June, we'll bring in our guest juror for the juried part. So it goes from this big, huge exhibition to a much smaller scaled down exhibition of about 30-ish pieces that will then be a juried show. And that is going to be our guest curator. I'm so excited. Guest juror is Janelle Logan, who is the vice president and creative director at the McCall Center in Charlotte. So we're really excited. We want to, I was hoping to bring in someone, with a statewide kind of lens. And so bringing Janelle in, I hope will bring in more folks from all over the state. Anna Lee, our creative director, has been working around the clock on this, and this is kind of her brainchild, and we've taken it and really beefed it up. So I think this is the fourth time we've done it. I might be wrong about this, but it's every other year. And then what we're doing, what folks don't know, and so we'll have cash prizes. There will be cash prizes, which is exciting. So there's more information that you can find out about, like all of the requirements for submissions, how to submit. It's really easy. And then also more about the cash prizes that we'll have for folks throughout the exhibition. But we also will be beefing it up with programming. So we're going to have a Fresh Sounds concert series, which will be a celebration of North Carolina musicians within the gallery. So it's so that there are musicians and spoken word artists to be in conversation with what's on the walls, right? So to activate that art on the walls. This is what happens when you put a This is what happens when you put a performing artist in charge of a visual arts organization. But anyway, yes, we'll have Fresh Sounds, and then we'll have Fresh Perspectives, which will be a series of artist panels, and we'll have different events and talks, and that I'm really excited about. We'll have Mavis Gragg, who does a series on how to collect. She'll be here doing a session on that. We'll have a panel called Fresh Leadership about different arts administrators that are new on the scene. So yeah, it's gonna be great. And so the Fresh Sounds series will be ticketed. That'll be kind of another part of the fundraiser part. But everything else is going to be free and accessible and open to the public. But it'll get people in the space to see
Yeah.
the work and also participate and engage with us in a new and different way.
That's amazing. I just need to block off all of May and June because I'll be like,
Pretty much.
yep, I'm going to this. Yep, I'm going to this. Like my schedule's booked. I'm gonna be there all the time.
That Google
Absolutely.
Calendar is about to get really full. Quick question though, before we move on.
Sure.
With Fresh, for those folks that are listening to this episode real time, I believe they're only going to have a few more days. Could you remind us of what the deadline is to submit
Oh, yes.
individual artists?
Very important. Thank you. Yes, our deadline for submissions is April 15th. So that is really soon. I do want to clarify. I talked to a few artists and they're like, oh gosh, that's like no time to make something. You don't have to make something. I mean, we love it if you make something special for us, but it's any work that you've created within the last 2 years. Perfect. So do check out the website, artspacenc.org. It's on our homepage. And check it out. It's really easy to submit. You submit electronically. But yeah, April 15th is the deadline. So please spread the word. This will be the first fundraiser that I'm a part of at Artspace. So I really want it to be a success. Our whole team, we have such an amazing team here now at Artspace that are many fresh faces, and then also some folks who've been here, and we're really bonding and being able to work together in a beautiful way. And this will be our first big fundraiser together. And so please spread the word so you can support our work and support the artist community here in Raleigh.
Definitely. And as always, the website will be linked in our show notes for anyone that's listening. So if you are driving, no need to write it down. We'll have everything linked. And go ahead and follow Artspace on social media as well. I know we will be sharing the Fresh listing, all the posts with every artist that you know. It's very easy to share it to anyone that you know that may be interested after you submit your artwork for Fresh.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
And real quick before we wrap up, we do have a few questions that we ask everyone on our podcast.
Okay.
So we want to know just a few lighthearted questions before wrapping up. How do you define success as an artist?
Yeah. So me personally, with my art, I see art not just as fluff, but also as a powerful tool to bring communities together and to shine a light on communities and people who have not had their stories told. And so whenever I can bring those stories to light, that is when I consider my personal art a success. So work around social consciousness and creating empathy within others for different people that are different from them. That is when I see my personal art as a success.
Beautiful. I absolutely love that. I love that. That's one of the best answers so far. Question for you then. What is one piece of advice you wish you had had before you got started on your creative and artistic journey?
Oh man. That there is no blueprint. And everyone's journey is different. And that is okay. that it will be okay. And if you have a love and a drive, and I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true. If you have a love and a drive and a connection to what you're doing, then nothing will get in your way of doing it. And everyone's artistic career looks different, and that's okay.
Awesome. Especially as a creative yourself who has taken so many, I feel like, twists and turns and bravely just jumped from one mission to the next. I feel like that's super valuable information because sometimes you can be stuck in like one identity or one role and really understanding that larger impact of impact that you want to make as an artist in whatever outlet that may be, more administrative, more visual artists, more performing artists. It's kind of like
Well,
a
and
column of your time.
yeah, and I was told once by a dear mentor of mine, you can have it all. You just can't always have it all at once, right? So I thought that was really valuable advice as well. Like right now, I'm the CEO of our arts nonprofit. So yeah, I'm not doing, 10 shows a year. That's not happening. And that's okay. I'm still an amazing artist. I still, as long as I can continue my artistic practice in some way. So, then that maybe it's a smaller recital instead of a big giant production, but that's my personal example for that. But you will have ebbs and flows throughout your life with family, with career, with all of that, but you will always be an artist, right? As long as you're creating in some way. It may not be as on a large of a scale as you'd like, but I think that that's really important as well. Like no one can take away your talent. Like just because it's been, a little bit of time since you've made a piece or since you've been on a stage, it doesn't take away from your artistry, right? You're still an artist and you can whip that out anytime. Yeah.
I love that. And I feel too like the way you just described it, it reminds me of that idea of these are all branches on the same tree. So you can't be on all the branches at once, but they all connect somehow. I don't know.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
Yeah, and each chapter of your life serves a purpose. And so it's like developing a different skill or building a different relationship. And
They all feed into each other.
yeah, the past always has a
Absolutely.
meaning when you look backwards. They're all connected for a reason, even if you might not know in the moment.
I know.
Absolutely.
It all do.
Love that. And one final question, a more of a practical question. If you had $100 right now, what would you splurge on or invest in terms of your art or art business or arts administration that would bring you joy?
I would probably, this probably was more than $100. I would love to put a reel together of all of my performances over the years to live on my website. One thing that visual artists have that performing artists don't always have is documentation. And so when I'm on stage, there are copyright issues and things. And so I have to go to all the different theater companies I've worked with and see what kind of archival footage they have and put it all together in one big video so I can have that and see what I've done. So I think that's probably what I would splurge on. I don't know if I have the time to put that together, but yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good, especially for artists who, whether established or emerging, understanding that importance of documentation. The earlier you can document, even if you don't think it's significant, you can say, hey, at least I'll be able to show my growth 10 years, 20 years.
Yes, get it while you can. Because I'm looking back like 15 years ago, like, ooh, can I track down that theater company that I did that awesome production with and find a video? Like,
right.
It's like really hard.
You don't have any connections there anymore. They're old leadership.
Right.
There's like, hey, I performed here once. Do you have a video of it? And they're like, well,
yeah, exactly. Or maybe like a piece that you sell, right? Like you want to make sure you get a quality photo of that before you sell it, and you may never see it again, right? So it's similar.
Yeah.
It definitely is. It's documented before it moves on to its new home.
Exactly.
Woo! Yeah. That's all part of it. This has been amazing, Carly. Thank you so much for joining us on today's conversation. So many gems in this one. So we are super happy that you joined us on our conversation today.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for having me. I'm glad we got this conversation. I've been looking forward to this, and And any artists out there listening, I'm here all the time at Artspace, so please come say hi. And both Jackie and Adriana can tell you, like, I'm constantly going all over the place around the building. So please come say hi. I'd love to meet you. Come say hi to our team. They're here and accessible and want to welcome you. So thank you each for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Of course. And where can people stay connected with you personally and Artspace online and on social media, just to make sure that they can
Yeah,
stay connected?
sure. Yeah. So Artspace, our handle on Instagram is Artspace NC, as in North Carolina. So Artspace NC. And you can also find us on Facebook at Artspace. Make sure it's the one in North Carolina. There are a few art spaces, but we're the best one. And so you can find us on Facebook and on Instagram. Eventually we'll get to Twitter. We'll get there. And then Carly P. Jones is my handle on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter really. If you find a tweet from me, it was probably from like 10 years ago. So yeah. And Facebook, Carly Prentice Jones is my artistic page. And Carly P. Jones is my personal one.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carly. As always, if you want to stay connected with both of us, I am at J Sanders Studio on all platforms.
I'm at May Arts. I can't think. I'm at May Arts on all platforms as well. And of course, we're going to be linking all of this in our show notes so that it's easy for you to find these resources.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening today, and we'll talk to you next week.